Most people think the story ends at the empty tomb, the stone rolled away, the grave clothes folded, the angel with the impossible message, "He's not here. He is risen." And then we close the book. We celebrate Easter Sunday. We sing the songs. We say the words. And we move on. But what if the resurrection wasn't the ending? What if it was only the beginning of something far deeper, far more personal, far more dangerous to your comfortable faith than anything you've ever been told? Because between the resurrection and the ascension, there were 40 days that most Christians skip over entirely. 40 days that your Sunday school class probably never covered. 40 days that changed 11 broken, terrified, doubting people into the most unstoppable force the ancient world had ever seen. And here's the question that's going to stay with you long after this video ends. Why didn't Jesus go straight to heaven? He had already won. He had conquered death. He had satisfied the justice of God. The curtain was torn. The grave was empty. So why did he stay? Why did he choose personal encounters over public spectacle? Why did he walk with the broken instead of standing before kings? Why did he meet doubt with wounds instead of glory? The answer is going to reshape the way you see God and the way you see yourself. Because these 40 days weren't a pause between two great events. They were a blueprint, a pattern, a message written across time. For you, the most powerful being in the universe has just walked out of death. He could have appeared on the steps of the temple. He could have shown up in Pilate's courtroom. He could have stood before every person who screamed, "Crucify him," and let them see exactly who they had killed. Instead, he goes to a garden before dawn, and he finds a woman who is weeping. Her name is Mary Magdalene, and her past is not clean. Scripture tells us she had 7 demons cast out of her. 7. In a religious culture built on purity codes and social hierarchy, she would have been untouchable, unreliable, the last person you'd put on the witness stand for the most important event in human history. And yet, Jesus, who has just conquered death, comes to her first. He calls her name. One word. Mary. And everything breaks open. Not a speech, not a theological declaration, not a miracle. Just her name, spoken by the voice she recognized more than any other. And in that moment, she becomes the first evangelist of the resurrection. The first human being to say, "I have seen the Lord." Now stop for a second, because this is not a coincidence. This is a statement about how God operates. After the most cosmic event in all of history, God doesn't go to the powerful. He goes to the broken. He doesn't seek out the ones with influence. He finds the ones who are weeping before sunrise, and he says their name. Maybe that's why you're watching this right now. Maybe you've been standing at your own empty tomb, thinking it's the end. And maybe, just maybe, you haven't heard him yet because you're still looking for him in the wrong direction. He's already there, and he knows your name. Here's a scene that almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most relatable moment in the entire New Testament. 2 of Jesus' followers are walking away from Jerusalem, not toward the city, away from it, away from the chaos, away from the grief, away from the place where everything they believed had been nailed to a cross and buried. And they say the most honest, most gut-wrenching sentence in all of Scripture. We had hoped that he was the one. We had hoped. Past tense. 3 days ago, hope was alive. 3 days ago, there was a plan. 3 days ago, God was going to show up the way they expected. And then he didn't. And then the cross happened. And then the silence started. We had hoped he would heal the marriage. We had hoped the diagnosis would come back clear. We had hoped the door would open. We had hoped God would intervene before things got this bad. You know exactly what that sentence feels like, because you've said your own version of it. And here's what Jesus does. He doesn't appear in blinding light. He doesn't announce himself. He simply walks up beside them and asks what they're talking about. He lets them speak. He lets them pour out the whole story. He listens to the full weight of their broken expectation. And only then, only after they've said everything, does he begin to open the scriptures. Everything, he says. Everything was pointing here. Not to the kind of Messiah they wanted, but to this, the suffering, the death, the third day. It was all written. They just hadn't seen it. And here's the part that breaks me every time. They don't recognize him the whole time. Not during the walk, not during the teaching. Only when he breaks bread, only in that simple, ordinary act, do their eyes open. And they turn to each other and say, "Were not our hearts burning within us?" That burning they felt, that was him. The whole time. They thought it was just a conversation. It was God walking beside them in their worst moment. So let me ask you something. Is there a road you're walking right now? A direction you're moving away from something? Away from a dream that died? Away from a faith that didn't hold up to the weight of real life? What if the stranger who joined you on that road isn't a stranger at all? What if your heart is already burning, and you just haven't called it his presence yet? Now we come to the room. Doors locked. Curtains drawn. 10 men. Men who had seen the dead raised, who had walked on water, who had witnessed miracles that defied every category of human understanding. Sitting in the dark. Not because they didn't believe in Jesus, because they no longer knew what to do with him. There's a difference, and it's important. The cross had broken their logic, not their love, their logic. Their model of how God works had completely collapsed. They thought power looked one way. They thought victory looked one way. And then Friday happened, and all their categories were wrong. So they locked the door. Not out of unbelief, out of something worse. Confusion mixed with grief, mixed with fear of what comes next. And I want to ask you a question that might be uncomfortable. Is your faith currently in a locked room? Not because you've stopped believing in God, but because reality hit harder than your theology could absorb? Because the thing you were certain God would do, he didn't do? Here's what Jesus does. He doesn't knock. He doesn't wait for them to unlock the door and invite him in. He simply appears. In the middle of the room. In the middle of the fear. And the first thing he says is not, "I told you so." Not, "Where were you when they arrested me?" Not, "Do you understand now?" He says, "Peace be with you." Not as a greeting, as a transfer. A peace that has no logical explanation. A peace that walks through locked doors. And then he shows them his hands, his side, the wounds. He doesn't hide them. He doesn't cover them with resurrection glory. He holds them out like evidence, because the wounds are not weakness. The wounds are proof. Proof that the death was real. Proof that the life that came after is even more real. And then he breathes on them. The same word used in Genesis, when God breathed into Adam and he became a living soul. This is a new creation moment. He doesn't just restore them, he remakes them. And then he says the words that flip everything upside down. "As the Father sent me, I am sending you." That locked room wasn't a hiding place. It was a launching pad. They just didn't know it yet. And there is one more person in this story. The one who wasn't in that room. Thomas. And his reaction is more honest than most of us are willing to admit. "Unless I see the nail marks, I will not believe." Is that unbelief? Or is that a wound that needs more than words? Because sometimes doubt is not a rebellion. It's a scar asking for proof. And here's what shocks me. Jesus doesn't shame him. He doesn't lecture him on the weakness of his faith. He waits. 8 days. 8 days of silence. 8 days while everyone else had already seen. 8 days of being the only one still waiting. Why the delay? Why not come immediately? Because faith that grows in silence is often stronger than faith that grew in the crowd. And when Jesus comes back, he comes back for one person. Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. And Thomas never even touches him. The presence is enough. From his lips comes the most complete declaration in the Gospels, my Lord and my God. Not just teacher, not just prophet, God. And then Jesus says something that crosses every century between that room and your screen. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. That is about you. If you are in your own 8 days right now, if everyone else seems to have had their moment and you're still waiting, you are not forgotten. You are not disqualified. You are being prepared for an encounter that will turn your questions into conviction. Now we come to the most personal scene of the 40 days, the one that hits closest to home. His name is Peter, the loudest voice in the room, the one who said, "Even if everyone else falls away, not me." The one who drew a sword in the garden, the one who walked on water, and the one who, hours after that sword was in his hand, stood by a fire in a courtyard and said 3 times to 3 different people, "I do not know him." Not a private failure, a public one, witnessed, recorded, permanent. And now, after the resurrection, Peter knows Jesus is alive. But knowing he is alive is not the same as knowing you are forgiven. Because there are sins God forgives that the human heart cannot release. And so Peter does what people do when they don't know where they stand in the story. He goes back to something familiar. I'm going fishing. 3 words that say everything. I don't know what I am anymore. I don't know if there's still a place for me. I'll go back to what I understand. They fish all night. They catch nothing. And when dawn breaks, a figure is standing on the shore. They don't recognize him at first, because Jesus often comes looking like someone ordinary. A stranger on a road, a gardener in the morning, someone standing on the beach. He calls out, "Have you caught anything?" They say, "No." And in that single syllable is every prayer that came back empty. Every night of effort that produced nothing. Every attempt to rebuild a life that wouldn't hold. Without him, nothing. Throw your net on the right side. They've heard this before, a lifetime ago at the beginning of everything. And the nets fill. John turns to Peter. It is the Lord. And Peter, without thinking, without calculating, without worrying about how he looks, jumps into the water. Because when grace becomes real, shame stops winning. And here is what Jesus has already done before Peter reaches the shore. He has built a fire, fish cooking, bread ready, breakfast for a man who hasn't eaten after a night of failure. Think about that detail. The last time Peter was by a fire, he denied Jesus 3 times. A fire, in a courtyard. 3 questions. Now, a fire, on a beach. 3 questions. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Feed my lambs, again. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord. Take care of my sheep, a 3rd time. And Peter is grieved, because he understands. This is not an interrogation. This is a resurrection. 1 question for every denial. 1 affirmation for every failure. Not, do you promise to never fail again? Not, do you understand what you did? Just, do you love me? Because the question was never about performance. It was always about the heart. And every time Peter answers, Jesus gives him back his purpose. Feed my sheep. He doesn't just forgive Peter. He recommissions him. The man who fell becomes the man who leads. The man who denied becomes the man who dies for the name he once denied. The man who sat by that fire in shame becomes the man who lights a fire on Pentecost that sets the world ablaze. And Jesus closes the conversation with 2 words, the same 2 he used at the beginning. Follow me. As if nothing broke, as if the story never stopped. Because for God, your failure is not the final chapter. It is the place where His grace gets to write something better. Maybe you're sitting by your own fire right now, carrying something you can't put down, convinced that what you did or didn't do means you're out, done, replaced, too far gone. He's still making breakfast, and the question is still the same. Do you love me? A mountain in Galilee, the 11 disciples standing before Him. Matthew records something quietly remarkable. When they saw Him, they worshipped Him, but some doubted. Some doubted. Even here, even now. Even after the empty tomb and the locked room and the breakfast on the beach. And what does Jesus do? Does He wait for everyone to get on the same page? Does He delay the commission until the doubters are fully convinced? No, He gives the command to all of them, doubters included. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go. Not go when you feel ready. Not go when you've processed your questions. Not go when your theology is airtight. Go. Make disciples of all nations, baptizing them, teaching them to obey everything I commanded you. This is not information transfer. This is life transformation. The goal is not people who know things about Jesus. The goal is people who live like Jesus. And the nations, they start at your door, your neighbor, your coworker, the person you eat lunch beside, the family member you've been avoiding, and then the line that changes everything. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age. Not, I will check in occasionally. Not, I'll be available if you need me. Always. To the end, the 11 people on that mountain had no money, no buildings, no political power, no platform, no protection. They had one thing. I am with you. And that was enough to turn the ancient world upside down. And then Jesus does something that doesn't make immediate sense. He tells them to wait. He's just given the greatest mission in history. He's just said, go to all nations. He's just commissioned them to change the world. And then, do not leave Jerusalem. Wait for the gift my Father promised. Wait? After everything? After the resurrection, the encounters, the command? Wait. Yes. And the reason matters more than most of us realize. Mission without the Spirit is just noise. Evangelism without the Spirit is just argument. Service without the Spirit is just performance. Ministry without the Spirit is just management. He says, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. Not, you will receive help. Not, you will receive support, power. Because what they were about to walk into wasn't a PR campaign. It was a spiritual war. And you cannot fight a spiritual war with human energy. So let me ask you something. Is there a place in your life right now where you're moving fast on something that might require you to first be still? A decision made from urgency instead of direction. A ministry started in your own strength, and you wonder why it feels empty. Better a delay with God than speed without Him. Better a pause that produces fruit than a rush that produces only noise. Those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. Not those who run, not those who hustle, those who wait. Because there is a fire you cannot light yourself. And when it comes, it makes up for every moment of waiting. The Mount of Olives, the same feet that walked on water, The same hands that touched the lepers, broke the bread, held the children. The same voice that called Lazarus out of the grave, standing before them, one last time. And he lifts his hands, not for a miracle, not for a sign, for a blessing. And while he is blessing them, he rises. No dramatic music, no explosion of light, no announcement. He simply ascends, and a cloud receives him out of their sight. Now, here is where we get this wrong. We read the ascension as departure, as absence, as the moment God went far away and left us to figure this out on our own. But that is not what is happening. When Jesus ascends, he doesn't go to an empty room in heaven. He goes to a throne. He sat down at the right hand of God. The ascension is not a retreat. It is a coronation. He's not gone. He's governing. And then the angels turn to the disciples who are standing there staring at the sky, and they say something that splits history. This same Jesus, who has been taken from you into heaven, will come back in the same way you have seen him go. He will return, not metaphorically, not spiritually, the same Jesus, the same body, the same wounds, the same voice, which means we are living in the space between ascension and return, between the throne and the coming. And the question that frames everything is this: how do you live in that space? Do you look at the sky and wait passively? Or do you look around at a broken world and understand that you are currently his hands and feet in it? When he ascended, the responsibility descended. Not because he couldn't do it himself, but because he chose to do it through you. You are not a spectator to the story. You are part of it. So here's where we land. The tomb is empty. The throne is occupied. The Spirit is available. The mission is active. And somewhere in these 40 days, there is a version of you. Maybe you're Mary, standing in a garden, convinced it's over, not realizing the voice behind you already knows your name. Maybe you're the two on the road, walking away from something, your heart burning, but your mind still calling it coincidence. Maybe you're in the locked room, doors shut, fear running the atmosphere, not realizing he walks through locked doors. Maybe you're Thomas, in your 8 days, stuck in the gap between everyone else's testimony and your own encounter. Maybe you're Peter, carrying the weight of something you did that you can't forgive yourself for, not realizing he's already built the fire. And the question he wants to ask you isn't about what you did wrong. It's about whether you still love him. And maybe, just maybe, you're standing on the mountain, hearing the command, feeling it land somewhere deep, and wondering whether you're actually supposed to take it seriously. You are. These 40 days were not recorded for theological interest. They were recorded for you, for this moment, for the specific version of doubt, grief, failure, or mission you're carrying right now. The same Jesus who called Mary's name calls yours. The same Jesus who walked beside 2 broken people on a road is walking beside you. The same Jesus who didn't rebuke the doubter won't rebuke your questions. The same Jesus who made breakfast for the man who denied him is making a place for you too. And the same Jesus who ascended with the promise of return is coming back, which means the story isn't over. Not his, not yours. The resurrection wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of your part in the story. And the only question left is the same one he asked Peter, the one he's still asking across every century, to every heart that will be quiet enough to hear it. Do you love me? If the answer is yes, then follow him, because that has always been enough to change everything.